Forward, reader's note. Before we get into the story, you should know that this is a sequel to Dragoness Bahamut's original, Everything Changes. The link to the first story is available in the description below, but I want to clear up the reason that I didn't just read that one. Here's the thing, first impressions matter, and Everything Changes starts out as a childish-sounding story. Dragoness is a darn good writer, so perhaps even in the beginning she wrote that way deliberately so that readers would feel the transfer from the lighthearted television anime to the dark and angsty places she ends up taking us. Oh yes, Making My Way is not a happy story, and yet it's positively cheerful compared to what comes after it. I do not want to set this story with the wrong impression. The other reason I'm skipping over Everything Changes is that it isn't all that relevant to this story. At best, it's a setup, one of those deals where I told you that story to tell you this one. I'm sure you've noticed that this video's thematic picture is that of Mew looking at Ash Ketchum, but from a distance. There are at least two ways to interpret this picture, but the way I see it, Ash and Pikachu are a mirage, a fading memory from the past. And that's because the Mew looking at them, that is Ash. Before I clarify this statement, I'd like to issue a spoiler alert. If you haven't read Everything Changes, and want to read that before listening to this, back out now, because I'm about to summarize its plot. As I'm sure you've guessed, this fanfic revolves around Ash. It all starts with this video clip from way back in the Indigo League series of Pokemon, Season 2, Episode 79. Just before his final Pokemon League match with Richie, Ash gets captured by Team Rocket.
I don't have time for this. I have a Pokemon League match to get to.
We have some bad news.
And it's about the Pokemon League. You're out of it, twerp!
In the show, Ash gets out of there by having Squirtle fill up the truck with water. However, Dragoness chose this episode as the point where everything changes, and an alternate reality begins. In this alternative, Team Rocket immobilizes Ash with a giant glue-shooting cannon, and actually succeed in bringing him to Rocket headquarters. There, his Pokemon are taken hostage, and Boss Giovanni tells him that he'll only get them back if he becomes an agent of Team Rocket. Ash eventually gives in and does Giovanni's bidding, winning the Pokemon League tournament. However, the guilt of being a covert Rocket becomes too great for Ash, even when he gets most of his Pokemon back and gets to see his friends. Ash decides to run away, and spends weeks in the wild, eating Pokemon to survive. Being the all-powerful Rocket boss that he is, Giovanni eventually finds Ash again, and injects him with brain-altering nanomachines that will ensure his unwavering loyalty. Here's the catch though, Ash can't be electrocuted, or the mini-robots might permanently damage his brain. Ash's female Rocket partner, Billy, catches on to what's happening, and she takes Ash to a Team Rocket doctor to try undoing the changes. Pikachu is with them at the time, and when Ash attempts to call Giovanni to report the treason, Pikachu electrocutes Ash in an attempt to stop him. This sends the nanomachines haywire, and it triggers something not just in his brain, but in his entire DNA. Ash passes out. When he reawakens, he's Mew. That's right, Mew, the rarest Pokemon there is. This is when Mewtwo is pulled into the fray, for it's right around this time in the anime that Mewtwo escapes from his confinement, in the midst of an existential crisis. He's naturally drawn to Ash, as the only other one-of-a-kind Pokemon in an existential crisis, and after training him a bit, they launch an assault on Giovanni's home base. Mewtwo frees many of the captive Pokemon, and Ash confronts Giovanni, demanding to know why the Rocket leader has been so obsessed with him. This is the moment where Giovanni reveals that he's Ash's father. Shocked and disgusted, Ash teleports away with Mewtwo, and the story comes to a close. I'm going to do a critical review now. If you just click this video for context, you've got enough to go on so you can get on with the next story. Or stay, either way. My impressions of the original story were mixed. I like how cold and calculating Dragoness made Giovanni, and how hopeless it seemed to try resisting him. To be honest, that's one of my favorite aspects of any epic story, a villain who's presented as unstoppable, giving the hero a challenge to build up to. Ash's story is told in first person, and the reader is intimately close with his inner thoughts and struggles. Much of the time, he's trapped in a helpless situation, yet when he has the power to, he resists evil and attempts to do the right thing. I sort of wish he was smarter in his decision-making, but Dragoness has a way of getting the reader to sympathize for the character. Ash's situations would put anyone in an unstable state of mind. Even if he makes poor choices, I can understand that it was the best he could do with the cards he was dealt. There are, on the other hand, flaws with the story, some that undoubtedly continue even in the one I'm about to read. At several points in this story, Everything Changes pushes the reader's suspension of disbelief. For me, the first big one was when Ash caught some wild Pokemon without any training and went on to beat Richie with them. Come on, would you take on the Pokemon League with a Drowsy, a Magnemite, and a Sandslash? And before anyone says anything, I do realize that Richie got through 5 rounds with Pokemon like Charmander, Pikachu, and Butterfree. Yes, those are just as crap, but the difference is, those Pokemon earned 8 badges to access the League. Don't ask me how. There's also a lot of fluff in this story. Believe me, that summary I just gave cut a lot of unnecessary information. Everything's part of the experience, but if several chapters were to be removed, nobody would realize it. My biggest beef with this story is the main change, Ash becoming a Mew. Again, I realize there are canonical references of humans turning into Pokemon. Just look at the Fire Red entry for Kadabra. But Ash, a Mew? Being an emotional, not logical sort of story, Everything Changes acknowledges the strangeness of the incident, but provides no plausible answer. Even if it gets cleared up in Making My Way, you will at very least finish the first story feeling very unsatisfied. My criticism is twice as long as my praise, but make no mistake, I still consider Dragoness Bahamut one of my chief inspirations for becoming a writer and a storyteller. It is in her honor that I read Making My Way, and I hope that I do her characters justice with what little voice acting talent I have. Dragoness, if you're listening, I just want to say thank you.